Welcome to Comic Power. I'm your host, Comic Killer 72, and welcome to the 5th annual Top 10 Comics of the Year list. Hit it! Can you believe it? Another exciting year has just flown by in the comic books industry. Before I give you the top 10 plus some honorable mentions, here's some ground rules on how this list was put together. Rule number 1, this is for North American comics only. Rule number 2, this list does not include anime or manga, but you may see some of their influence in some of my selections. Number 3, it must be first released in the comic book format only. No graphic novels or comic strips or stuff like that. Rule number 4, it was first released between December 1st, 2019 and December 1st, 2020. Rule number 5, it doesn't have to be superhero related, it can be real world situations. For sci-fi that doesn't look comic booky, it's all welcome. Rule number 6, we're sticking to single issues here. Rule number 7, this is not based on speculation about what's the most valuable comic. However, some of the comics on this list did get popular, found an audience, and did go up in value. And I will talk about those books in the top 10 that are selling for a premium when it's relevant. And rule number 8, this is my personal list. Before you get triggered about what you think is missing, feel free to post your own top 10 in the comment section below. Alright, one last thing before we get started, we're going to recap all the previous top comics of the year since the inception of this YouTube channel. For 2015, the top comic was Divinity 1 from Valiant Comics. It's a story of a black Russian cosmonaut who leads a space exploration in 1960. He returns to Earth in 2015 with the powers of a god, looking for his long lost wife and his daughter. For 2016, the number 1 comic was The Fix number 1 from Image Comics. It's a hilarious dark comedy about 2 corrupt cops in Los Angeles. It's also an indictment on the sleazy world of Hollywood excess. The number 1 comic for 2017 was God Country number 1 from Image Comics. It's the story of an old man from West Texas with Alzheimer's, and when a tornado hits his house, he finds an enchanted sword which gives him all types of power, but the god who lost the sword wants it back. For 2018, the number 1 pick was Analog number 1, also from Image Comics. Taking place in the near future, a big doxing has happened on the internet, and all the secrets in the world are available for free. To combat the problem, all of the world's secrets are now printed on paper again and transported by human carriers called Ledgermen. In this series, we follow the adventures of one of them named Jack McGinnis. For 2019, it was Assassination number 1, once again from Image Comics. It's a dark comedy about a mob boss who hires 20 of the world's best hitmen to protect him after he becomes the target of an assassination plot, and 15 of the characters die in the first issue. So all 5 of my previous comics of the year picks were all indies. Will that continue this year? Well, we'll have to see. If you want to see the top 10 list for every year in question, then see the link in the description. 2020 was a real turbulent year, plagued by shipping delays on a lot of comics due to coronavirus. And for the first time since it was founded in 1970, San Diego Comic-Con was canceled. In all seriousness, this pandemic is no joke. I wish you and your family well. Please take all adequate precautions to stay safe as we try to navigate through this pandemic. Thank you for hanging in there with me doing the preliminary information. Now let's get into the list of the top 10 comics of 2020. Number 10. Shang Chi number 1 from Marvel Comics. This is a character that's also known as the Master of Kung Fu, getting rebooted back to number 1. You may have heard that he's getting a live action movie that's coming out in the MCU soon, but since he's not very well known outside of comics, for the benefit of those who don't know him, I will explain it. He's Chinese and a master of the martial arts, and may be one of the best hand-to-hand fighters in the Marvel universe. Making his debut in Marvel Special Edition number 15 back in December of 1973. And is he influenced by Bruce Lee? Absolutely. He needs no introduction. He's the greatest martial artist that ever lived. And he tragically passed away in the summer of 1973. So this is probably Marvel paying homage to him. Marvel Special Edition just morphed into his own ongoing title, which lasted well into the 80s, making him one of the few persons of color to headline its own comic back in that era. As for the movie, he's going to be fighting the real Mandarin. If you remember, this is the character that got Easter eggs as far back as the first Iron Man movie, and it pissed off a lot of people like myself when they gave us the fake Mandarin twist in Iron Man 3. So to make up for that debacle, Marvel was giving us the real Mandarin in the Shang Chi movie, and the lead character of the Master of Kung Fu will be played by Simu Liu, a Canadian actor of Chinese descent. So the cast will be virtually all Chinese. So the Chinese market will be very happy to see the MCU movie will have a virtually all Chinese cast. So his solo comic is a good vehicle to reintroduce the character and update him for the 21st century. Number 9. Red Mother #1, and this is one of 2 comics that make the top 10 from Boom Studios. This horror story made its debut on December 11th, 2019. It's the horror story of a woman who's trying to put her life back together when she loses her boyfriend in an eye in a robbery. And she starts to see strange visions in the new prosthetic eye that she has. This title received immediate critical acclaim when it was first released, and at the time I wrote this, it's up to 11 issues. It's the byproduct of Jeremy Hahn, who drew the cover and wrote it. He received acclaim creating beauty over at Image Comics. And it's drawn by Danny Luckert, who received acclaim drawing Regression also at Image Comics. So as you can see, both of the creators in this title have a lot of experience in horror, and they nail it on this. This is fantastic. If you like psychological horror comics, then this is for you. Number 8. Empire #1 from Marvel Comics. Marvel has a big crossover every summer, and this is it for 2020. Overseen by Al Ewing, and the story here, the alien civilizations, the Skrulls and the Kree, who have been at war with each other for eons, have now united under one emperor. So instead of waging war on each other, they're going to wage war on Earth, of course. And that attack is coming to our planet, and the Avengers and the Fantastic Four can't agree on how to respond. This is something that Marvel is using to set up future movies. Of course, the Fantastic Four have not appeared in the MCU yet, but it's coming soon, of course. The Kree were established in the Guardians of the Galaxy film, and the Skrulls were introduced in Captain Marvel, so we have those already available. So after the Fantastic Four are firmly established in, say, the year 2025 or something like that, this could be the big Avengers 5 crossover. So I'm not saying that the Empire storyline will be Avengers 5 in a live action movie. I'm just saying it would make sense. And this is why printed comics will always exist, because they give source material for these movies that we love so much. Some of Marvel's most recent crossovers, like Civil War II, fell flat. The Empire is not that. Al Ewing does a fantastic job of developing the motivations of these characters. It's very well written. So definitely pick up Empire. And if this storyline is used as a movie in the future, then I'll be here to say, I told you so. Number 7. The Joker 80th Anniversary Special from DC Comics. This oversized release is in honor of the Joker. This is Batman's arch enemy, a household name, and the most famous comic book villain of all time. Make this debut way back in 1940 in Batman #1. If Batman is all about logic and reason and order, the Joker, being his nemesis, is all about insane chaos. The character has been portrayed in live action by Cesar Romero, Jack Nicholson, Heath Ledger, Jared Leto, and most recently Joaquin Phoenix, who became the first actor to win the Best Acting Oscar in a comic book film. Heath Ledger's performance was Best Supporting Actor. R.I.P. As for the comic, it's just like when Batman reached his 80th anniversary in 2019, they're teaming up numerous writer-artist teams to tell new original stories about the Joker character. One of them is a partial origin of the new character called Punchline. The character kind of works as a sidekick and a new love interest for the Joker, replacing Harley Quinn, who's moved on. So absolutely pick this up. This should be in the personal collection of every comic book fan for eternity. Number 6. Alienated #1 from Boom Studios, and it's the second Boom title to make my top 10. Congratulations to this publisher. They're creating some awesome stories that's not getting recognized the way that it should. But this is what my channel is for, sharing this stuff with you guys. It's a story of 3 awkward high school outcasts that stumble across a new alien species that just landed on Earth and is just being born, and they bond with it. And it allows them to tap into the aliens' powers, such as telepathy, where they can read each other's thoughts and other people's thoughts as well. So this may sound like the movie E.T. on the surface, right? But it takes a darker twist, because this alien is going to grow up to be a predator. Not the predator, but a predator that's going to be too dangerous to be handled by a bunch of kids. Alienated also is a double meaning that these are the kids that found an alien, but they're also the kids that are the nerds at school that don't fit in and have difficult family lives at home. At the time I wrote this title is up to 6 issues, and I am very surprised it has not become a bigger hit, because it is excellent. Think of it as E.T. meets The Breakfast Club meets The Secret Life of the American Teenager. So definitely get a trade paperback so you can catch up to what's going on here. Number 5. Wonder Woman Dead Earth #1 from DC's Black Label. Black Label was assembled by DC to allow creators to go wild with some of their best characters, telling MA for mature, out of continuity stories. And the format size is also bigger. Most comics are about 6.5 wide by 10 inches tall, but Black Label is around about 8.5 inches wide and about 11 inches tall. In this story, Wonder Woman is awakened after a hibernation after a nuclear war has decimated the world and has wiped out most of the world's population. She stumbles across some scavengers and saves them from getting eaten by a monster. Her power level is much lower than it was before she took her hibernation, so she defeats it, but it takes a lot out of her. And she is the last superhero alive. Everyone is dead besides her. But despite saving them, they wind up tricking her and drugging her and bringing her back to their civilization to fight in the arena as a gladiator. So think of this story as Mad Max meets Planet Hulk. It was drawn and written by Daniel Warren Johnson, who made his name over at Image Comics with Extremity, the story of a female artist who gets her hand chopped off when her civilization goes to war, and she becomes one of her civilization's greatest warriors despite the handicap. This is part 1 of a 4-part miniseries, and it's an absolute classic. While I'm here, let me give a strong shout out to Linda Carter, who portrayed the Wonder Woman character on television from 1975 to 1979 so vividly. Thank you to your contribution to the Wonder Woman mythos. Number 4. The Department of Truth #1 from Image Comics. This works as a conspiracy theory tale meets a psychological horror tale meets a suspense thriller meets a detective story. It's created and expertly written by James Tynion, who's making his name as the writer of Batman right now and the co-creator of Punchline. The Department of Truth story follows an FBI agent who's been tasked to follow subversive and fringe groups to see if they're committing any crimes. So he follows their social media activity and gets invited to a flat earther convention. This comic is fictional, but there are people in real life that really believe the world is flat and that the moon landing was fake. So the FBI agent infiltrates the inner circle of the Flat Earther Society. His work is recognized by a secret government organization called the Department of Truth, who brings him in to work for them. The artwork style on this is perfect for the story because the abstract use of color and dimension creates like this dream world, which is perfect for the story in that you don't know what's real and what's fake. It's like a dream. And this title name drops every crazy conspiracy theory you can think of, from Flat Earth to QAnon, the Illuminati, etc. And James Tynion is definitely worthy of being nominated for Eisner for this story. It's only about 3 issues in at the time I wrote this, so you still have time to catch up, and issue #1 is going into reprints. I highly recommend this title. You should be reading it. Number 3. Thor #1 from Marvel Comics. This is the most obvious thing on this list. It's the redesign of Thor. It's written by Donny Cates, and it's part 1 of a new storyline called Dark Winter. Let me take this time to brag on the success of Donny Cates once again. He went from just being another comic book writer to being this mega god of cosmic sci-fi horror action. Donny's breakout was the miniseries God Country, which I mentioned earlier in this program. He scored another hit with Redneck, also with Image Comics, about a secret family of vampires in East Texas that gets outed. Then Marvel gave him Venom and he crushed it on that, and then Marvel gave him Thanos, where he crushed it again and created the Cosmic Ghost Rider. So putting Thor in his hands is the next logical conclusion, and Donny Cates is just on fire. There's no stopping him. Issue #1 of this new Thor reboot has gone to 3 printings to fit the demand, and I will decline from telling any details about the Dark Winter storyline because you should already be reading it. Dude, it's Donny Cates. Once again, this is why printed comics will always exist, because they're using us as source material in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The next live-action Thor film is scheduled for May 6, 2022, and they're going to be using material from Thor, the God of Thunder, from the 2013 run, where Gord the God Butcher was introduced in issue #2, and he's going to be the villain of that story, and he's going to be played by Christian Bale. Yep, the Dark Knight is coming to the MCU. The Love and Thunder film is also using source material from Thor #1 from 2014, which is the first appearance of Jane Foster as the new Lady Thor. So, with comic book source material popping up in movies this quickly, so it's not beyond the possibility that something like the Dark Winter storyline could pop up in Thor 5 in the year 2025 or something. So the Thor comic being rebooted back to #1 with the Dark Winter, you want a piece of this. Number 2. We Live #1 from Aftershock Comics. This is a dystopian end-of-the-world sci-fi tale taking place in the year 2084, where 90% of the world's population no longer exists due to a whole series of natural disasters over the decades. And the human race gets a tip from aliens that the next disaster is going to wipe us all out and make us extinct. So they give us a break. They send us technology that will allow us to send 5,000 kids to a new homeland on their planet. Each chosen kid gets a pod, and inside the pod is going to be a bracelet, which they will link up at what's called a beacon, which will send them off to the next planet. But they have to get to the beacon before time runs out. And our lead characters are a preteen girl and her little brother, and she has to play mom to her little brother because both of their parents are deceased, and her mom told her to make sure that the kid gets onto the beacon. But along the way, the bus breaks down at their own, and they have to make it on foot, and the world is habitated by mutated monsters. This is the brainchild of the Miranda brothers, who have worked on Harley Quinn, Coffin Hill, Batman Beyond, and other projects. And it's Aftershock's biggest hit since Animosity back in 2016. We Live is not just a great sci-fi story, it's a touching tale of human survival and how resilient we can be when things are at their worst, making this the perfect book for the year 2020. Before we get to #1, let's go over the honorable mention list. A touch of piano, please. Giant-sized X-Men Magneto #1. Marvel put out a whole series of one-shots about some of the best mutants in the X-Men universe, and the Magneto story was the best to me. The Master of Magnetism is the chief antagonist in the X-Men universe. The Scumbag #1 from Image Comics. This is a sci-fi comedy about the worst person alive in the world. Through sheer dumb luck is the person that's going to wind up saving it. Daredevil #25 from Marvel Comics. This is the climax of a storyline in which Daredevil winds up landing in jail. Chip Zdarsky, who got famous as the artist on Sex Criminals, is writing this and was nominated for an Eisner. The Kill Lock #1 from IDW Publishing. A futuristic sci-fi tale in which 4 robots are convicted of crimes, are banished from their home world, and are bound together by a kill lock, a programming link that means that if one of them dies, all of them die. Punchline #1 from DC Comics. This is the most popular new character introduced in 2020 by far, making her introduction in Batman #89 during the Joker War storyline. This spin-off title goes deeper into her origin and is written by James Tynion, who is the co-creator of the character. He's currently writing Batman, and he made my top 10 for the Department of Truth. He's having a great year. Sacred Six #1 from Dynamite Entertainment. Spinning out of the Vampirella universe. This is written by Christopher Priest, the guy who gave us the Dora Milaje in the Black Panther universe. Based on the sexy look of the lead characters, it looks like it was influenced by Vanity 6 or Apollonia 6, those Prince proteges from the 1980s. Far Sector #5 from DC Comics. This is a continuation of the storyline following the new African-American Green Lantern named Sojourner Mullen. And her tragic origin is told in the story as a former police officer and former Gulf War veteran. This character was first introduced in Far Sector #1 back in 2019 and made my list of one of the top 10 comics of that year. Decorum #1 from Image Comics. This is from the master of long-form storytelling, Jonathan Hickman. It's an action-adventure sci-fi story about assassins, with some very compelling acid-tripping looking visuals. Exo Men of War #1 from Valiant Comics. This is probably one of the best characters introduced in the last 30 years. He's like Iron Man meets Conan meets Thor meets Venom, and you should be reading his stuff. And Wonder Woman #750 from DC Comics. It's a 96-page oversized issue in celebration of Princess Diana. And like Detective Comics 1000, it has a variant cover that's inspired by the art style of every decade of the existence of the character. My favorite is the 1970s inspired variant, which includes Nubia, a character that DC has definitely not used enough. Wonder Woman made her first appearance in comics in 1941, so she turns 80 years old in 2021. All hail Princess Diana. Thank you for hanging in there with me. Now let's get to the #1 comic of 2020. #1. And what is probably the biggest surprise hit of the year, Strange Academy #1 from Marvel Comics. And as the name implies, Doctor Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, has started a new school to help new wizards learn how to use their magic. So yes, this is the Doctor Strange universe meets the Harry Potter universe, and yes, this is Hogwarts. The headmaster at the school is Jericho Drum, aka Brother Voodoo. He's a very powerful sorcerer himself, introduced in Strange Tales #169 back in 1973. Some of the professors at the school include other magic-based characters from the Marvel Universe, including Magic from the New Mutants, the Scarlet Witch, Damon Hellstrom, and even the Ancient One, Doctor Strange's original teacher. It's written by Scotty Young and penciled by Humberto Ramos. and it achieves on what you'd think would be an impossible task, introducing 11 new characters in the first issue. One of the students is an oversized frost giant, and one of the students is actually the son of Dormammu, who is the arch enemy of Doctor Strange, so that should be an interesting dynamic. Doctor Strange himself does make a cameo in this issue with a quick action scene at the end. As I stated before, it's a big hit for Marvel, and issue number 1 has already gone through 5 printings. And let's face the obvious here, this is a Disney Plus show that's waiting to happen. The tone is lighthearted and fun, but there are edges of darkness underneath it. So to me, Strange Academy number 1 is the best comic of 2020 by far. At the time I make this video, it's only 6 issues in, so you still have time to get in early, close to the ground floor. Alright folks, those are my top 10 comics of 2020. Feel free to speak up in the comments about what you think of my list. Also feel free to post your own top 10 there. There's some great things happening in the comic book industry. Printed comics will never be canceled. Don't believe the hype. Now go out there and support your local comic book store. Don't forget to subscribe and also click on the bell for notifications. It'll let you know when a new video is posted. This video is dedicated to the memory of Chadwick Boseman, the Black Panther. You are now one of the immortals. Until next time, this is Comic Killer 72 for Comic Power saying Happy New Year and bye-bye.